The UN Security Council is due to vote on deploying a regional force to South Sudan, despite opposition from government. The vote may be delayed, though, as negotiations continue over a draft resolution presented by the United States. Russia, China and Egypt have voiced their concerns. South Sudan's government has agreed to the deployment of a regional force as proposed by regional body IGAD. The big sticking point is who this force will report to. The African Union says it will form part of the UN mission, but command has not been worked out. Speaking to CCTV, South Sudan's government says it's written to IGAD. It wants to negotiate the regional forces mandate and is adamant the force should not fall under the command of the UN mission.
The protection force should have been an independent body, not under UNMISS, so that they can perform their functions and duties, the three functions which we had agreed upon. But now it is said that these people will still report, the commander of this protection force will be reporting to the commander of UNMISS. In other words, they are part and parcel of the UNMISS under the special representatives of the Secretary General. This is why we have written and we have sent it to the heads of states and government, our concerns about this community. Because when the discussions were made, the positions of the heads of the states and government were very clear.
Let's get you more on these developments now. I'm joined live from New York by UN correspondent Liling Tan. Liling, first off, the Security Council is due to decide on the UNMISS mandate. What's the latest on that?
Hey there, Panina. Yes, we were expecting this vote to take place about 3 hours ago, but that vote has been postponed to later in the day. It's due to take place in about 2 hours. What's holding it up? Well, as we've heard, there have been several sticking points. The first main dividing issue has been about what you mentioned earlier, the U.S. proposal for a 4,000-strong regional protection force to be deployed to South Sudan. There are questions about who this force should report to. The U.S. has recommended that this force reinforces UNMISS's force on the ground, and that should be under UNMISS's control and command. There are also concerns that this force, in doing so, could undermine the sovereignty of the South Sudanese government. Questions also remain as to the exact role this force would play in terms of how it would conduct its peacekeeping operations to keep the peace and protect civilians. The other sticking point is about the proposed arms embargo. Now, the U.S. wants to impose an arms embargo and have an automatic trigger mechanism to kick in should it be found that the South Sudanese government is disrupting UNMISS's ability to conduct its operations and carry out its mandate. Now, there are some council members who don't want this automatic trigger mechanism to be included in this resolution, and there are even other council members who don't want an arms embargo mentioned at all in this draft resolution. So it seems that council members are ironing out these finer details as we speak, and it looks like the vote will happen later this session. Now, this is the last day for the Security Council to vote on that resolution, as the current mandate for UNMISS expires at the end of the day. Panina?
Now, the AU, Liling, wants a regional protection force to report to the UN mission. But South Sudan's government is against that. So how will that likely inform the Security Council's decision? And what are the Chinese delegates there saying?
Well, that concern has been a major concern, and it's likely what's holding up this vote right now. The concern, as we've heard from South Sudan, is that how this force could undermine and threaten its sovereignty. And as we've heard as well, other council members share this concern too. Now, it will likely, some of these council members want assurances from other members, including the U.S., that the South Sudanese government will be consulted before such a force will be mandated and deployed. Now, as for the Chinese delegation, as usual, they are very cautious about making public comments, but some observers and experts say action could speak louder than words. Now, as we know, China has in the past rejected calls for an arms embargo, but there has been suggestion that China may be more willing to consider it this time, given that its oil interest in South Sudan has been under growing threat and it's also lost several peacekeepers in recent violence.
And Lillian, there are huge concerns over the incredibly complex humanitarian crisis in South Sudan. Are we any closer to a more coordinated effort to address that?
Well, yes, the humanitarian situation, as you and I both know, has been growing increasingly dire and desperate as the human rights situation also deteriorates. We're hearing reports of summary executions, sexual violence. It's altogether becoming quite serious and quite desperate. It's been fueling a mass exodus of South Sudanese civilians across the border as they flee the violence. And we just got a report from the UN that some 110,000 South Sudanese have fled across the border to Uganda this year, with about 75,000, that's more than half of that, having fled in the past month alone. And Uganda is coming under severe strain trying to accommodate this with its refugee reception centers reportedly now housing 5 times more people than it was originally intended to. We're hearing reports of 4.8 million South Sudanese who do not have enough food, about 250,000 children who are malnourished. There's a cholera outbreak. So it's becoming extremely desperate. What is the UN doing? Well, a lot is riding on this resolution because the proposed regional protection force would be a key response to addressing this humanitarian crisis as well.
All right, Liling Tan joining us live there in New York. Many thanks, Liling.